Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. Laura Keller is the executive director of the St. Louis Fire Department Foundation. Her job entails raising money for the department and assisting in any way she can. Lately, that's meant helping the department acquire personal protective equipment to keep firefighters safe from the coronavirus. And Keller tackled that task even as she herself battled the virus. She recently opened up to our producer Evie Hemphill about her own experience with COVID-19 earlier this spring.
Before all of the lockdowns and everything kind of came into play, I had a trip planned to go just visit family. And we kind of even talked about, is it the right thing to do? Should we, let's not fly, let's drive. But we figured, okay, we're going to be in a house with our family, so what could possibly go wrong? Mm-hmm. And so we went in kind of early mid-March and stayed with family for about 5 days. And I traveled with a friend of mine and my teenage daughter, and we had a wonderful time, and we came back and immediately started to feel ill, both my friend who I traveled with and myself.
That's Laura Keller, executive director of the St. Louis Fire Department Foundation. Now, remember, this was back in the very early days of the coronavirus being found in the Midwest. It was not easy to get tested. Laura Keller's friend had a high fever and was eventually able to get tested at a place that was more than an hour's drive away. She tested positive. While Laura couldn't get a test, even after requesting one, she was told to assume she was positive and to self-isolate. Soon she experienced chest pain and difficulty breathing. And here's how Laura described her physical experience with the coronavirus.
Over the next 14 days or so, my symptoms were chest pain and difficulty breathing and low-grade fever and just disorientation and fatigue. Very, very serious. You don't appreciate fatigue until you really have it. And I'm a single mom who works full-time, so I'm used to being a little worn out. The breathing was pretty terrifying because I could not take a deep breath. I could breathe, but I could not take a deep breath. And so I would take some time every day to do breathing exercises, guided meditation, things that really focused on relaxing and breathing as best as I possibly could. One of the things that I had that made the difference for me being able to stay home was an O2 monitor. So even when I was very short of breath, I was able to take monitor and know that I still had 97 or 98% oxygen saturation in my blood, which meant that I was okay and did not need to go to the hospital. Eventually, my breathing improved greatly. I still had the cough for about 2.5 weeks, but eventually that went away as well. And after 17 days, I felt confident enough to have my daughter come home, and I was okay.
That's Laura Keller, executive director of the St. Louis Fire Department Foundation. Laura said she was initially afraid to tell people she had COVID-19. But about 3 days into her illness, St. Louis Fire Chief Dennis Jenkerson reached out because he needed her help.
I got a call from the fire chief who said that we needed to purchase about 12,095 masks. And he had a vendor that could provide them within 10 days to 2 weeks. And here was all the information and the cost. And I said, okay. And we talked about it. And at the end of the conversation, I said to him, and I was a little bit hesitant because I kind of felt like I was very scared, and I didn't want to tell people that I had it because I was afraid that, I don't know. I mean, I just had this feeling like people would march in front of my house with torches and pitchforks. Oh my gosh, she's got it, don't go near that house or something. And so even though I was hesitant because he's the fire chief and I work for him in a way, and I confided and I said, hey, by the way, I have it. I have COVID-19. And, of course, there was just silence. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I told him that I had my thermometer and that I had my O2 monitor and that I'm not going to be a martyr. And I know, but if I don't answer a phone call right away, don't panic. It's very difficult. Sometimes I need to take a lot of breaks and rest and so forth. And so then I was able to go ahead and complete the order and do some other things. And then what was sweet about all of that, though, was then the next day he called me to follow up on the order, and had everything gone through. And then the next day he called me to ask me a question, and I don't remember what it was, but I answered it. And the next day he called me to asked me another question, but then he couldn't remember why he had initially called. And I realized it was 8:00 on a Saturday night and that he wasn't calling for work at all. He was calling to check on me.
And that's Laura Keller, Executive Director of the St. Louis Fire Department Foundation. And Laura stressed to Evie just how grateful she was for Chief Jenkerson's support. Now, Laura's bout with the coronavirus ended as well as it could have. She's now recovered, and she took it upon herself to get tested for antibodies. She says she, quote, wanted to be counted and help our region fight this virus. That also allowed her to donate plasma at the American Red Cross. Now it may help a more seriously ill patient with their recovery. But Laura's story, I think, still hits home a reality that the St. Louis Fire Department deals with every day. Anyone might have COVID-19. And yet the fire department still needs to take their call, show up at their house, and provide critical care. And joining me today to talk about how the department is dealing with that is Fire Captain Garon Mosby. Captain Mosby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Sarah.
So your job seems like one of the truly scariest during this pandemic. You can be summoned at any moment to go deal with a sick person at any address. You have no idea if they're infected, if their space is infected. How do you even begin to deal with that?
Well, two things. Before I answer that question, something Laura said really resonated when I was listening, that she was hesitant, as close and connected. We're a family, and as close and connected as she is to the fire department, she didn't want to call, right? She didn't want to feel like she was a burden. She didn't want to be singled out or feel special. I need all of your listeners to know that if you feel sick, right, and you can't get in contact with your primary care physician, please call us. We're seeing that folks are not calling, and they really should be. So I want to stress that, just listening to it. To answer your question, though, we are trained and taught at the very beginning, the entry level of medical care, emergency providing, is that everyone has it, right? So it doesn't matter who the person is, you assume that everyone has it. What is it? It is what you don't want to get. So the way that we approach it is that it's putting on proper protective equipment, and you have to do it every time, every call, because the minute you're laxed or you don't put something on correctly or you take it off incorrectly, it's a germ, right? It's not something you can see. It doesn't take a lot of it for you to get it. So it's taxing. It can be mentally exhausting, but we carry on. This is what we signed up to do.
So you're always prepared for that amorphous it. But this it, we know, has some complications beyond just the great unnamed it. I imagine you guys are doing some extra sterilization or some extra protective equipment beyond what a firefighter would normally do.
Oh my goodness! I wouldn't even. We don't have a long enough show to go into all the new processes that have been implemented. I will say this: I was putting together a timeline for the fire chief on exactly what we did when we did it. You know, starting back to January 24th. I think we might have had one confirmed case in the country, and the chief started sending out information. When I went to put together this timeline, Sarah, it was in maybe late February, early March. I had about 4 inches of paper on my desk from information we had sent out, communications, and some of it changed, right? We were learning more, so something might be this way on Monday, Thursday. Guess what? We've learned, so we're going to alter this a bit based on the new information that we've had. So, it's sort of champagne problems. I think any department member on the job would be right to say, oh my goodness, we are getting too much information. but those are champagne problems, and if you're sipping champagne, you're not bad off.
That's great to know that Chief Jenkerson was so aware of this threat at a point when so many of us were shrugging it off. And it sounds like that's served you guys well.
It really did. I'll be even more honest. Back when this really back in January, I'll say actually no, December. I was back and forth to New York doing the live rescue show, and the chief mentioned it to me, and I honestly, I'm like, okay, all right, I hear you, and then he had just gotten back from Italy, so he was more connected with a lot of things that were going on abroad.
Boy, that could put it on someone's radar, being in that country at that point.
Right. He had just gotten back from a family vacation. And so, you visit a place, you're connected even when you return, and they had the floods and then the pandemic. So, he is always on top of things. I'm not surprised. And that has a lot to do with the information that the department received. He knows it, so we know it. January 24th, we started surveilling calls differently. When you call 911, we're asking you a lot of, additional calls to find out if, we need to take extra precautions in responding to your call. We put out a health alert to all members. So as he got information, we got information.
So with that extra sterilization and these extra steps that you're trying to do between people that you deal with, has that changed the response time for the department?
So the response time, no.
That's
right?
great.
We are. You'll get a fire truck to your door in less than 4 minutes, a medic unit between 8 and 10. What has changed, and part of the reason we're still able to do that, is because the call volume has relatively stayed around the same of what we're accustomed to dealing. The added challenge is that after these calls now, everything's got to be decontaminated. The back of the medic unit, we've got these foggers. Every engine house in the city has a fogger. Every medic unit has a fogger, and we mix a CDC recommended solution, and we fog out the back of the medic unit. We wipe down everything. So it's an added step that wasn't here 4 months ago, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, and that we're doing. We even got a communication recently, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that, hey, need to start decontaminating your shoes, right? It's a germ. You can track it. You can transport it on the bottom of your shoes. So, I was in the field yesterday doing a little bit for City TV, and we watched the 28s go through the whole process, the decontaminating of the shoes, the removal of the PPE. It's a process, and you have to do it right every single time.
And I feel like you guys have an added layer of complication here because unlike police, who also could be called to any address at any time, you guys live in close quarters together. How have those living situations changed because of COVID-19?
Right. So if you're on a fire truck, social distancing is something that we are all encouraged to do. Sometimes we can really try and do our best to do that, but sometimes it's not practical, right? We deal in an emergency situation. We live together in the firehouse. So whereas you can distance within the firehouse, there's sometimes you're going to work a patient or you're going to be at a fire, and it is not necessarily 100% possible to be socially distant. I would say the decontamination efforts have certainly ramped up. Each house has all the appropriate equipment, the disinfectant they need to successfully do that. And we're motivated to do it. Right. Yeah. It's not just like we're going to clean the house once. No, we want to clean because we're the shift that has to live here. So we want to make sure it's done right.
Yeah, that's the best incentive in the world. I know some other local fire departments have had some cases. Are you aware of any within the ranks of the department?
So this is my pre-thought out response to that question. We have approximately 800 uniformed women and men that put on the uniform, and they're battling COVID on the front lines every day. Since January, when we've been tracking this, we've had less than a dozen tests positive.
Wow.
So when you put that into context, that is amazing. And I almost don't want to say it, but it is factually true. Less than a dozen.
When you say less than a dozen,
women and men every day.
Have those been clustered within any particular firehouses, or is it just random cases here and there?
You know what? I probably shouldn't answer that, but I will. I would say there was there was a small cluster that I am aware of, but that was a handful of those. I do not know the specifics of the other, and part of the reason I don't know is because I don't have to answer questions like that.
Sure. But so at this point, what you're aware of is the firehouses are doing okay. Nobody's currently suffering any sort of cluster or outbreak.
No. They've been professionally cleaned outside of what we normally do on a daily basis. And again, our members have what they need, and we're motivated to get it done.
So you guys tweeted yesterday, I believe this was like yesterday afternoon, that you'd gotten information about an anonymous complainant saying that you didn't have enough personal protective equipment in one very specific engine house. And you guys were very proactive on putting it out there that you'd gotten this complaint, you investigated it, you found that that was not the case. What was going on there?
Right. So the chief, I was in my office yesterday afternoon, and the chief came in and he, let me know that we had this complaint and that he was going by personally to put eyes on the situation. And so I requested to accompany him. And here's the thing, like we talked about it earlier in this conversation, that 4-inch stack of papers, the proactive measures that the department has taken since the beginning of January to ensure that everyone had or has everything. So it was kind of a shock to receive that type of complaint. But, in the back of my mind, I thought there's no way that that's possible. And once we got to the engine house and we, got eyes on the log and we, looked at their supplies, it was not based on factual information. So despite a pandemic running, you're still going to have individuals that have their own agendas, and I'm not sure what was intended to be accomplished, but certainly not based on factual information. And, the members at the house were actually shocked that was the complaint. And like I said, if there's going to be a legitimate complaint that any firefighter in the city, any paramedic, any member can launch, is that they have received an overabundance of information. I would support that. I really would, but there again, those are champagne problems. And
Laura had mentioned earlier her efforts to try to get protective equipment. You're saying you guys have enough. The department is not facing a shortage at this point.
You know what? I've got to, again, give hats off to the leadership, the fire chief and our logistics coordinating supervisor, Tracy Brady. I spoke with Tracy earlier today and, asked her what her concern was. And she had at one point worked 7 weeks straight. 7 weeks straight. And she told me that, and I'm just paraphrasing this, COVID is a big problem, but it's a small piece of it. She said she lays awake at night thinking about the budget, how to procure, how to keep, how to maintain PPE. So it's beyond a full-time job. She's obviously passionate about it. And the chief always says we stay ready so that we don't have to get ready. Now, no one could have, imagined that this would come and affect us to the magnitude that it has. But there was a certain amount of readiness that the St. Louis Fire Department had at the beginning. And we've been able to maintain that, particularly in the area of personal protective equipment. And we're okay right now.
Boy, that is great to hear. I know so many places are struggling with that, and it's great to see that proactiveness has paid off for you guys, and that you're doing well enough to worry about those champagne problems as opposed to the really hardcore ones. So going forward, it sounds like one of the things you mentioned up top is that if people are feeling ill and they need to call the fire department, they should not feel bad about doing that. Any other thoughts you want to leave us with today as far as the members of the public in St. Louis?
Well, the world is reopening, or the area is reopening Monday, right? And if there's any concern or something we're watching is that maybe with things reopening that folks won't take it as seriously as it truly is. Just because businesses are reopening on Monday, COVID hasn't really gone away. It's still there. So it's still essential to maintain the social distancing aspect. It's still important to wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, and just be smart and stay abreast to what's going on. If you're feeling sick, we are emergency service provider. If you can't get a hold of your primary care physician, do not hesitate to call us. It is why we are here, and we can't wait to do come out and help.
Well, those are some good reminders. Be smart is something that we could all stand to think about going into this weekend. So St. Louis Fire Captain Garon Mosby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Until next time, Sarah, thank you so much.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.